Hello, and welcome to Daily Dose Anime Recap. Today, we will be going through the series Reaper of the Drifting Moon, where we meet a red-eyed man named Pyo Wol. Once a happy-go-lucky boy who drifted through the world by both land and sea. Everything changed when he was captured by a mysterious man and forced to struggle each day to survive and become a world-class assassin. Pyo Wol swears that no matter what happens, he will survive and kill them all. But before that, make sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon. Now, without further ado, let us dive into Reaper of the Drifting Moon. 14-year-old drifter Pyo Wol happily smiles down on the food he has collected as he searches for a bridge he had come across on his way into town when a dark figure suddenly looms over him. Next, we see Pyo Wol awakening on a stone floor. He notes that while he is not blind, he cannot see anything and is in complete darkness. He tries to stand and realizes he cannot move at all. He remembers seeing the strange man and wonders why he had done this, as he doesn't remember making any enemies who would hold a grudge. He begins taking stock of himself, going over his and his mother's name and going over his situation. He begins to cry as he is scared and alone and fears he will starve. He tries to figure out why the man would do that to him and, upon realizing that he did nothing wrong, gets angry. In his rage, he moves his hand and realizes that he can breathe easier and his senses have returned. He hears water dripping and struggles to move towards it. He drags himself painstakingly over the cold, hard floor to get a drink, determined to survive. He ends up cutting his finger on a wall and collapsing. Suddenly, a mysterious, glowing figure appears above him. He realizes it's himself. The standing, glowing version of himself looks down on him and asks him why he's trying so hard to survive, as he is worthless. His glowing form tells him to give up, and if he does, he will be at peace. He tells the apparition that he doesn't think that's the case, which seems to annoy it. It tells him that he is wasting his time. But Pyo Wol said that he would never be at peace, even in death, if he didn't take to stab the man who trapped him here. The apparition asks if he really intends to do this and asks if he will truly never give up. Pyo Wol gives a determined shout of NEVER, and the apparition smiles at him and then vanishes. Wondering what that was, he forces himself up and feels the wall. He finds a moss growing on it and tries to eat it. He almost throws up from the taste, but decides it is not poisonous. He begins to eat more, once again reminding himself that he must survive. He follows the wall and calculates the size of the square space he is in. He hears the sound of an iron door and turns to see light pouring through a slot in the door and moves towards it. He sees a hand put a bowl through the slot in the door before closing and leaving him in darkness again. He smells the food. It is rotten and leftover from other meals, and he realizes that with 5 different kinds of leftovers in the bowl means there is more than one person who has trapped him here. He concludes if there are 5 captors, and that there must be at least 5 other prisoners, probably more. We see Pyo Wol working out in his prison by doing handstand push-ups. 4 months have passed since he woke up in his cell, and he has learned that the food slot opens once a day. He reflects on how he thought he would go insane, but he has been occupying himself by working out. He also has adapted to be able to see a bit in the dark. Tons of centipedes live in the cell. As he watches the centipede, a white snake appears and bites him, causing what feels like fire to burn through his veins from the venom. As he writhes in pain, the food slot opens and he catches the bowl, reiterating that he will not die, no matter what. Later, he sits and watches the snake as it hisses at him, remarking that in the detox process, his vision has improved even more. He has heard tales of people getting stronger after being poisoned and wonders if he should try to get a resistance to it. He allows the snake to bite him again and wonders instantly if he has made a mistake as pain courses through him once more, although he notes that it is less painful than the first time. He notes that, although the snake cannot see from being in the darkness for so long, It is still a great hunter, but it is intelligent about it, being sure to not scare the insects away once it's had its fill. He feels a vibration in the ground and realizes that the door has opened. He exits his cell and finds that the next prisoner is 20 steps away. He smells rotten flesh and realizes the person in the next cell is about his age and dead. As he moves to check the other cells, he finds a pair of big iron doors with the bolts removed. He pushes them open, and the two people inside look just as surprised to see him as he does to see them. There is a man and a woman, both of whom are surprised to see him, but he walks right past them, looking into the other cells and noting the dead prisoners within. The woman asks who he is and where he came from, as she and the man with her are the only survivors. Pyo Wol thinks to himself that while she is looking at him, she cannot actually see him in the darkness, and he is the only one who has adapted to their low-light conditions. He introduces himself and explains that he was trapped in the adjacent sector. She is outraged to learn that there are other sectors, and introduces herself as Pyo Wol, adding that the man is Song Chonwoo. He walks past them, telling them it's time to go. They are surprised and ask where they would be going. He tells them that there must be other sectors to the prison. They realize he is right, and Pyo Wol tells Song Chonwoo that since it is dark, he should hold her hand. He does, and the three of them enter the next sector where more people look surprised to see them. He notes that unlike his sector, hardly any of them have starved here, but instead killed themselves. He notes that there is far more food in these cells than his, and wonders why they would discriminate between sectors. Pyo Wol interrupts his thoughts by telling him that the prisoners here were trapped around the same time they were and begins introducing them, but he simply walks forward to the iron door nestled in what looks like a cave entrance and pushes, flooding the area with a blinding light. They note that they are still underground and that the light is from torches, which blind them since they have been underground for so long. In this giant cavern, there is a building lit by torchlight. They enter the structure. They note that it is empty and flimsy, as if made in a hurry. One of the girls from the third sector, a pretty girl with white hair and blue eyes, asks him if his name is Pyo Wol. She introduces herself as Lee Min and tells him that she will be in his care from now on. She puts a hand on the side of his head and leans in close, asking if his pupils were red from the start. He is surprised to learn this and wonders if they are red like the pupils of the snake. He becomes afraid because it is not good to be different in a situation like this. She assures him that it is not a bright red and only visible in the direct torchlight. He's relieved to hear this, and she asks what he is thinking about. He skirts the question by saying this and that, and she notes that he is different from the other prisoners. She elaborates and says that they were all confused, but he's the only one who is so deep in thought. When asked what they are doing by the others, Lee Min skirts the question by saying this and that, quoting Pyo Wol from earlier. Pyo Wol informs them that everyone has decided to stick together and asks if they will be sticking with them also. Pyo Wol says he will see, which for a moment seems to upset Pyo Wol, but she quickly smiles and says that he should let her know if he changes his mind. Lee Min agrees to stick with them, saying it is the best chance at surviving. Pyo Wol looks at them, thinking that their isolation must have made them a little crazy, and decides to watch and wait from a distance. We find out that the prisoners have formed into 5 groups, one led by Pyo Wol and Song Chonwoo, one led by a man named Kang Il, one led by Yeomil Jung, one led by Go Young-san, and then Pyo Wol by himself. 2 boys discuss Pyo Wol in hushed tones, wondering how he was the only survivor of his sector and whether or not he killed the others. Pyo Wol hears them but ignores them. He is busy inspecting the surroundings. He's positive that this building had been recently constructed, but because of the moss on the cave walls, he believes the actual cave was made a very long time ago. He suspects the cave's user must be extremely wealthy. As he is examining the wall, he sees light from the ceiling and a basket is lowered down full of food. The people descend on the basket, but Pyo Wol and Song Chonwoo stop them. The people get mad, but so Pyo and Song Xianwood suggest that they distribute the food fairly amongst everyone, and so the leaders of the four groups gather to distribute it. Pyo Wol tells them to wait as he wants to take his fair share before it is distributed. But Yeom Il-jung grabs his wrist and says no one will take anything until the leaders distribute it, as the basket is under their control now. Pyo Wol glares and then slams a hand into Yeom Il-jung's face, taking him off his feet and rams him into the ground. Pyo Wol angrily chokes him, yelling at him to say that again. The horrified crowd yells at him to stop, and some move to help, but he glares at them as well as he drives his thumb into Yeom Il-jung's eye. So Yeol calmly approaches and asks him politely to release Yeom Il-jung. She admits that Yeom Il-jung should have understood how much Pyo Wol had done for them, and assures Pyo Wol that no one will touch his share. He stands, and Yeom Il-jung screams at him. Pyo will simply tell Shim he is free to attack if he wants to lose his other eye as well. Pyo Wol sits high up on the structure and watches as everyone happily eats below him, thinking to himself that this is a test to filter out the useful children, as was the imprisonment. He suspects many of them will be dead and that he may have to kill some of them by the end of this. So Yeol approaches, cheerfully asking how he is, and if he is okay after making everyone his enemy. She also informs him that many children left Yeom Il-jung's group after the fight. He adds to this that the ones who left Yeom Il-jung's group went to her S, and she is surprised to know that he is watching them. He thinks to himself that she eats the least after securing the most food, and that makes her group extremely loyal to her. She asks him if he still sleeps in the dark room, and he tells her it's comfier there. He grips his arm and we see puncture wounds, as he is also sleeping there to gain more poison resistance, which he has successfully done as he feels no pain when bitten. She asks him to join her group again, and he once again declines. The basket lowers again, and this time there is less food. Pyo Wol thinks to himself that it has begun. We are introduced to Mak Nozum, a boy who survived from the 3rd sector and entered So Yeol's group. He was the smallest physically but the hardest worker. He is found dead. Everyone angrily declares they will make whoever killed him pay. But Pyo Wol thinks to himself that everyone knows why he died. It's because he was the weakest. Song Xianwood says that if they knew who did it, they would take revenge. But so Yeol says it doesn't matter because someone from their groupo is dead, so now they have to kill the weakest of another group. Pyo Wol knows a war has started. The weakest member of Go Young-sin's group is found dead, and from then on, someone was found dead after each night. The children began to become savage from starvation. Pyo Wol eats moss, remarking that it is still disgusting and that the savage children have not come this far yet. 4 people, led by Yeom Il-jung, begin down the corridor, searching for him. The white snake bites the leg of one of them, killing him. Pyo Wol sneaks up behind another and begins choking him to death. Yeom Il screams at him that he has a demon and attacks, but Pyo Wol dodges each attack with ease and then appears behind him, telling him it will not end with just an eye this time. Yeom Il-jung begs for his life, asking to join forces, and then when that doesn't work, saying he can be a useful underling. Pyo Wol tells him that he may be loyal in the beginning, but sooner or later would try to kill him again. Pyo Wol kills him and angrily walks into the darkness, saying the reason he killed him is because he is still weak. The other 3 leaders become fearful of Pyo Wol, wondering just how strong he was if he could kill 4 people. Go Young-sin tells his group not to touch Pyo Wol. A messenger then tells him that 2 people were banished from So Yeol's group, and they have a potato. He gathers his group, lamenting that they were about to kill someone over a potato, and move towards the 2 banished children. His group charges, despite his orders to stop and move like a ravenous band of ghouls as the 2 children flee. Go Youngsun watches in horror as he realizes that the position they are running into puts them at a disadvantage, and the banished children whistle, signaling for armed people to leap out and beat his group. Go Yansang himself is surrounded as So Yeo-wol approaches. He asks her to take just his life and spare the group, but she says they cannot afford to keep that many people alive, as that is more mouths to feed. She tells him that he would do the same if he was in her position and orders them all killed. Go Young-san, however, is formidable and fights back, as he and his group fight for their lives. So Yeo-wol looks up at the top of the building where Pyo Wol watches and pieces together that this battle is making use of a specific terrain and location, and that it likely corresponds to the real-life location that their captors want them to be. Accustomed to fighting in, he realizes they are being raised as disposable tools, as assassins. We see a group of boys laying in a circle, bragging about the people they killed and laughing. They remark at their boss, So Yeo-wol is the best. As they do this, Lee Min watches with disgust, thinking that she can still smell the blood on her own hands. She holds back vomit, thinking about the people she killed, and wonders how they can eat so freely after what they'd done. The ceiling opens, and So Yeo-wol smiles, thinking that now that Go Youngsun's group is dead, they can eat their fill. She wonders where Pyo Wol is and spots him. She wonders why he has such a rigid expression on his face and thinks that he seems worried about something. His worries prove correct when masked warriors drop down and begin beating everyone in the cave. Pyo Wol decides to endure it, worrying that he will draw attention to himself if he fights back this early. 3 masked figures stand apart from the other warriors who had dropped down, and Pyo Wol knows they are the leaders. One of the masked leaders raises a hand for his men to stop, and he tells the group his name is First Sword and their lives belong to him now. One of the children asks who he thinks he is, and a warrior decapitates the boy. We see First Sword then sitting with a bowl in front of him, saying that they are curse poison, and that if you put poisonous organisms together, they will kill each other until only one is left, and that one left will have the most potent poison. He discusses this with the other 2 leaders. They say only the most wicked and those with the strongest survival instincts are left. He asks the second leader, which are worth paying attention to, and the second leader says so, Yeo-wol, as she has the greatest influence over the group and leads the largest group. First Sword tells him to grant her special attention so she would not dream of starting a rebellion. The second leader says that Song, Cheon Woo, and Kang El are also worth paying attention to, as they are the most outstanding in terms of martial arts sense. First Sword asks about Pyo Wol and says to keep an eye on him, as his sector had the harshest conditions, and anyone who survived that would not be normal. Once the second leader leaves, First Sword takes out a scroll, saying there are only 6 years left and wondering why their captain would accept a request like this. The third leader calls the children to attention from atop the building. He points to a flag and says the first to get to it will receive a 2-hour break, while the last to reach it will learn what true hell is. We get a montage of the brutal and torturous training the children are put through. So Yeo-wol reaches the flag first, and the leaders remark that it is as expected. Her intelligence, guts, and leadership skills are all top tier. First Sword asks about Pyo Wol, and the second leader informs him that he is completely average, not distinguished in any way. First Sword says he may have been mistaken and would have expected more from the survivor of the first sector. So Yeo-wol asks Pyo Wol why he is still reading a technique book on the thunder-splitting cultivation technique that the leaders made them read part of. He tells her he just felt like it. She remarks that he never gets tired and must be ridiculously fit. After she goes to bed, he thinks back to what the leaders had said. This was a technique to get them used to the idea of feeling ki. He thinks about the name and decides that while splitting thunder is not humanly possible, maybe it refers to the speed of thoughts being increased. He studies the technique with this in mind and is careful not to show how much faster he is learning martial arts. He wants to appear perfectly average to the leaders. This is working well until one of the students actually tries to kill him in training, smiling maliciously. He asks why the student would try to kill him, and the student laughs and says it's no fun having a fake fight. Pyo Wol notes that the instructor clearly doesn't care what happens now that he taught them sword techniques and isn't moving to stop this. The other student pulls hidden blades out and throws them at Pyo Wol, and then attacks in a fury of knife strikes. Pyo Wol blocks every attack, and the student tells him it is no fun if he just defends, prompting Pyo Wol to kick him in the gut hard enough to make him puke. The leaders then discuss the student's growth, and the second leader says they may only need 5 years of training as opposed to 7. First Sword tells him that he is underestimating the target, and that the man they must kill is the most skilled in Sichuan. He says if they mess up their attack, the entire shadow group will be wiped out. That's why the captain had them train the children. That way, even if they fail, they cannot be traced back to the group. First Sword orders him to push them even harder. The second leader says many of them will die if they do this, and First Sword says that is fine as the survivors will be far stronger. As he says this, Pyo Wol breaks the boy's arm. First Sword and the second leader appear and ask if Pyo Wol broke the boy's arm. He is shocked that they are there, as he did not see them approach. He says he did, and First Sword draws a sword, holding it next to Pyo Wol's neck. He is even more shocked at the speed with which the sword was drawn. He had not even seen it. He wonders if he made a mistake, but First Sword turns and begins walking away. He tells Pyo Wol that he must never leave a trace, and that breaking an opponent's arm just lets him know your martial arts style and identity, and to keep this in mind to never leave any trace. We jump forward in time by 6 years. A masked warrior strikes a student who was hiding, telling him if he were an enemy, the student would be dead. As he walks away, he thinks about how an inexperienced assassin's turtle-breathing technique will be noticed. This technique slows the vital functions to hide one's presence. The warrior walks down the street, striking more students and yelling that they are still far from being ready. He says he only has 1 student left, but stops. Realizing he senses no one, he wonders if they were wrong. He orders the person to come out as he cannot find him. Pyo Wol stands up right next to him and asks to take a break. The surprised warrior stutters a yes, but then glares. Pyo Wol approaches so Ye Wol and Song Qian would, along with a third person who greets him mockingly. He notes that the third student is wearing someone else's face and reveals him to be So Gyeoksan. He warns him if he keeps switching faces, he will forget his own. But So Gyeoksan says it doesn't matter, as they never getting out. So Ye Wol, however, wonders if this is true, as the food's quality has been slowly getting better. She says they will be given a mission soon. We see First Sword without his mask, revealing himself to be old. He says he must be getting soft in his old age as he is feeling emotional. 30 out of the original 300 children survived. The second and third leaders come in, and he tells them to take off their masks, revealing their names to be Second Sword Gu Shenhaiying and Third Sword Shang Ilshin. They say that their time trapped down there training the students is almost up, and that some of the students are stronger than the instructors and almost beyond their control. Second Sword says it is a waste to throw them away after 1 use, but First Sword says that was the condition of the contract, and they have no choice. He then says it is time to begin the final stage. They gather the students and put 3 books in front of them, telling them that 3 of them must learn these techniques, and the other 27 must kill the ones who learned it. This, he tells them, is their final training, and they will not be forced to learn anymore. Pyo Wol thinks to himself that the martial art technique will put a target on the back of whoever learns it, but that their actual assassination target probably knows it. He believes it is beyond anything they have learned so far, and says he is getting greedy, so he wants to learn it. So Ye Wol asks why he is willingly becoming a scapegoat, but he replies that they will see if he becomes a scapegoat or a wolf. She warns him to be careful as everyone here will be coming for him, but he says he looks forward to it. Later, we see Song Qianwood kill a student with a sword and apologize, telling him that he had no choice. They had drawn lots to see who would learn the martial art, and that student had learned it. So Pyo Wol, Song Qianwood, Gu Xinhang, and Li Min gather. The only martial artist left is Pyo Wol, and they lost him. So Pyo Wol thinks back to the last time she saw him. It was the middle of training a few days ago. She had told him she fears him less with a sword for some reason. Gu Xinhang interrupts her thoughts by suggesting they kill the instructors instead, since it is probably easier at this point than killing Pyo Wol. Song Qianwood agrees with this, but worries they be put some kind of restriction on them to prevent this. So Pyo Wol says they should find Pyo Wol first and worry about the restriction later. As they walk down the corridor, Pyo Wol is revealed to have been behind them the entire time. He is intrigued by their idea of killing the instructors. He believes they are keeping tabs on them in case they come up with an idea like this. But he also believes this would be a good chance to learn their motive. Pyo Wol hides out near the instructor's base, noting that while it is tightly guarded, it is not something beyond his ability to get through. Because while the turtle breathing technique supposedly is undone if you move, he can combine it with the thunder-splitting cultivation technique he can move. While using it, he walks right past the two guards and into the instructor's building. He explores the building, wondering why they have been trapped here and what the end goal is. He finds the scroll with the request from the boss. He reads it and finds out that it is a request to kill Wu Gunseng while leaving no trace relating back to the Blood Shadow group. He senses someone coming as he wonders who Wu Gunseng is. First Sword enters and immediately knows someone was there because the things in the room have been moved. He meets with Second and Third Sword and they all agree it must have been Pyo Wol, as he is the most gifted when it comes to infiltration. They decide to use something called the Hell Flute to direct all of the children's animosity towards Pyo Wol. First Sword stands above the cave and says it is time to show them who owns them and plays the flute, causing them all to collapse in agony. As Li Min says, it feels like insects are devouring her. Pyo Wol stands over her and says they have activated the restriction. Pyo Wol wonders why he only feels a slight ringing in the ear while everyone else is incapacitated. He goes through a mental list of things they all did. They ate and trained the same, but he realizes the snake poison he kept getting bit with is the difference. Masked warriors move through the area, and Pyo Wol pretends to be incapacitated as well, so as not to let them know he is different. He gets stabbed by First Sword, who says he is a nuisance who must be eliminated by Second Sword, says they need him for the mission, as he is the best infiltrator, and that as long as they have the flute, he is controllable. They give an antidote to everyone, and First Sword says that pain was because Pyo Wol infiltrated their base. So Pyo Wol, Song, Gu Xinhang, and Li Min search for Pyo Wol, and he asks why they are looking for him. So Pyo Wol says she knows he is either immune or resistant to the restriction, as he was not with them when it started. Li Min remembers that she was able to endure it because someone infused energy into her and suspects that it was Pyo Wol. He refuses to tell them what the restriction is because it does not benefit him. Gu Xinhang gets mad, asking if that is how he would treat his comrades, but he retorts that comrades wouldn't he hunt someone down with such enthusiasm. Gu Xinhang says he will be his friend from now on and never betray him, and that he will benefit from having a friend such as him. So Pyo Wol says she will also be his friend, and that she will ensure no child under her will show him hostility. Li Min blushes and says he's special to her. He tells them the restriction is curse poison and that they must figure out how to remove it themselves, as he simply is resistant to poison. They leave, promising help if he ever needs it. Li Min stays and tells him that her real name is Li Sealman, and that she wants him to remember it. Next, we see the children gathered, and First Sword tells them that they will be leaving the cave. He puts Pyo Wol in charge of the students. As he ascends in the basket, First Sword looks forward to retiring. Pyo Wol asks about the poison, and so Pyo Wol says Li Min knew a lot about poison and detoxed a few of them. As Pyo Wol ascends in the basket, he thinks about how deep underground they were, as if they had been in hell. He quickly tears a cloth from his outfit and wraps it around his eyes, ordering the others to do the same, lest they go blind. A man approaches the basket, stating that it appears they have made a few useful ones and that the requester will be satisfied with them. Pyo Wol determines this man is someone with an executive position from the way he speaks. The man is Blood Shadow Captain Gu Zhuyang. Pyo Wol thinks to himself that he has memorized the captain's voice. Once at their dwelling, Pyo Wol washes in a well and lays outside. He smiles as the students all enjoy the outside, splashing water and breathing fresh air for the first time in 7 years. As two students cry at the sight of a flower, it is crushed by a warrior who tosses them knives, telling them to take care of their weapons as they will be using them soon. First Sword and the captain drink tea together as the captain congratulates him on a job well done. The captain, who is revealed to be First Sword's nephew, tells him that he, along with Second and Third Sword, may retire. First Sword says that it is a waste to throw away the children after one use as they are too talented, and asks if he knows who the requester was. The captain does not know and says that until the Blood Shadow group is large enough to be on par with their rival group, the 100 Wraith Union, it is unwise to get on the bad side of a big shot willing to pay so much. So Gyeoksin asks Pyo Wol if he is shaking with nervousness, which he says yes he is. So Gyeoksin then scoffs because they both know that isn't true. Pyo Wol asks him if he is shaking as he is talking more than usual. But so Gyeoksin says it is excitement as after 7 years of suffering, he wants his reward of finally taking someone's head in this mission. They are told to come out stealthily with their weapons as they will be going somewhere. Menace emanates off Pyo Wol as he says finally. Fourth Sword is impressed that they are following him so well. He tells them that on the top of the mountain is their target and that he is in a manner identical to the one they trained in. We see a beautiful woman in a peacock robe outside. She touches a flower and it vaporizes. An old woman asks if she is here by herself and calls her Seol Ran. The old woman is the abbess of a group of women in a monastery. The woman berates Seol Ran, calling her ungrateful, and Seol Ran notes that she appears to be feeling pressure and that it is pitiful. Another woman from the order says that their proposal has been accepted and asks what to do about that other plan, and an image of the captain flashes through the abbess's mind. Meanwhile, Pyo Wol is waiting for nightfall with the group to assassinate the target. Suddenly, he gets a bad feeling and a spear pierces one of the students. A muscular man grins as he hefts the impaled student into the air with his spear, saying it was true. There were assassins hiding here. His name is Yujin Ok, and he's the leader of a group of spear-wielding warriors in yellow. Pyo Wol orders a retreat. As the assassins flee, Yujin Ok begins taking his men's spears and tossing them, impaling the fleeing assassins one by one. The final assassin has a spear thrown at him, but he turns, it is Pyo Wol. He kicks the spear back with such speed that it pierces Yujin Ok's ear and lands behind him. The men pursue and Yujin Ok approaches the wounded So Gyeoksan. Pyo Wol reviews the events in his mind and realizes someone must have leaked information, as they had not passed anyone on their way up. But Yujin Ok had known there would be assassins. He also realizes that Fourth Sword and his men are gone. He wonders if there was conflict within the Blood Shadow group as 2 arrows pierce him. He decides he has been abandoned by the Blood Shadow group and escapes into a river. He determines at least 7 clans are after him and wonders why they would put all this effort into catching some assassins. He dodges a sword strike and comes face to face with Li Min. She says she's glad to see him and collapses, bleeding profusely from an injury. They both know she is beyond saving now, and she asks him to stay with her until she passes. He tells her that this was all because of Wu Gunsang, and she asks him to say her real name. He does, and she dies. He tells her to watch over him as he intends to find whoever did all of this to them and make them pay. The captain fights an immensely powerful woman, who gravely injures him. The abbess appears, and he is outraged as the 9 Calamites, the group she leads, are the ones who hired them in the first place. Meanwhile, Seo Ran kills First Sword. They drag So Gyeoksin in and ask him how many he was leading. She presses a hand to his head and blasts energy into him, and he reveals to having led 28 assassins. Her people report that 24 are dead. She orders them hunted down and tells Seo Ran to prepare for the wedding. A man goes out of the citadel to collect herbs, telling the guards that no one would dare touch their sect. He is then attacked by Pyo Wol, who gets information on Wu Gunsang. Wu Gunsang is apparently their senior brother of their sect and is incredibly skilled. Pyo Wol then transforms his face to look like the man S. He enters the citadel disguised as the man and walks up to where Wu Gunsang lives. Meanwhile, the heads of the King Cheng sect meet to talk about the plot to assassinate one of their own. Their leader says that years ago, during the War of Heavens and Demons, right before the province was overrun, an alliance was made and defeated them. The MAI sect as well as the Qing Cheng sect did not participate in this, and so their title of Great Family of Sichuan is an empty one, and they need to regain their former glory. They have a plan to do so within 10 years, and that Wu Gunsang is key to this. They ask how Wu Gunsang is and are told he has isolated himself for the world to focus on his training. One of the heads apologizes for not being able to raise his son properly, but he is told that it is okay. They all agree that if he continues, Wu Gunsang will be able to rival the successors of the other great sects. They then begin discussing the marriage proposal with MA sect. They say it seems like a good match, but they are worried because of the abbess. She is desperate to surpass them, and they are worried that with the marriage they may be the ones who are devoured. Meanwhile, Pyo Wol circles the palace, which is identical to the building he was trained in. As he tries to sneak in, he overhears 2 guards talking about senior brother Wu bringing in another woman. One scolds the other for talking about it, as it is a sword sect, and to sleep with a woman in the sword hall is a great offense. Pyo Wol finds Wu Gunsang asleep with a woman in the sword hall and is astounded by his power, which eclipses that of the Blood Shadow Captain. He lowers a rope around Wu Gunsang's neck, and Wu Gunsang awakens. Pyo Wol lifts him off the ground, attempting to hang him. Wu Gunsang cuts the rope with his hand. Pyo Wol drops from the ceiling and draws his blades, charging the surprised Wu Gunsang, who seems more surprised than frightened as he easily blocks the attack and sends Pyo Wol across the room with a single hit. Pyo Wol begins blocking the attacks that Wu Gunsang sends his way, but even blocking is painful because of their power difference. He launches a blade at Wu Gunsang, who catches it and praises his skill with boyish enthusiasm. His face contorts, however, when he asks if that bitch's father sent him, leaving Pyo Wol to wonder who he is referring to. We are treated to a flashback from Wu Gunsang about how learning martial arts was easy for him as a child. While it was easy, it was not fun, and so he took an interest in women. He slept with many, but one particular woman was a mistake. She took her own life afterwards, and now he has to train in isolation for a year to atone for it. Present day, Wu Gunsang's power is overwhelming as it pours off of him. Pyo Wol is once again on the defensive as Wu Gunsang attacks, and while he does manage to get a kick in, it serves only to annoy Wu Gunsang. Pyo Wol throws attack after attack, which Wu Gunsang effortlessly counters. Pyo Wol uses the woman Wu Gunsang was sleeping with as a human shield, but Wu Gunsang gets around her and moves to deliver a death strike. Pyo Wol remembers his training as he studied the martial art of Wu Gunsang and parries with one of the swords in the room. Wu Gunsang is now enraged. How can someone block the secret techniques of his sect? Pyo Wol, who has studied the technique in and out, finds the weak spot and impales Wu Gunsang through the heart. Wu Gunsang father cries over his body as the elders lament their bad luck. The senior and junior brother debate whether or not to kill the girl who is with him, because if word gets out that he brought a disciple of their sect in for sex, his and their reputations will fall. Wu Gunsang as father stabs the disciple while they debate, telling her she shouldn't have survived and should have sacrificed herself to save his son. He falls to his knees in front of the senior brother and says that he doesn't care what happens to him now as long as he could protect his son's reputation. A farmer is stopped on the road by 4 armed men who accuse him of being the assassin that the abbess warned them about. They attack and he easily kills all but one, revealing himself to be Pyo Wol. He wraps the neck of the survivor with strong, thin threads and demands to know who the abbess is. He tells him that the abbess of the 9 Calamites is the leader of the Ma sect. Pyo Wol asks if the 2 sects have always helped one another, and the man says no, they used to hate one another. The man thinks to himself that if he can stall longer, the martial artist nearby will see the signal he gave. Pyo Wol realizes that the abbess knew Wu Gunsang, felt inferior to him, had the patience and wealth to enact the 7-year plan that kept them trapped and was located in the correct area. She is behind all of the misfortune that has befallen him. Pyo Wol is running away from someone and suddenly notices he has gone quiet. He wonders if the pursuer has given up when a great burst of energy explodes behind him, creating a fissure in the ground, caused by the martial artist after him. The man says that he let out too much force in his rage, and that his men need to capture Pyo Wol alive. The woman who killed the Blood Shadow captain floats above them and fires off an attack with intent to kill. She orders him captured. They chase him to the entrance of the cave he lived in for 7 years, and the martial artist sends his men in after Pyo Wol. The woman informs her own men that they will go down as well, and that they must find and kill Pyo Wol first. As the woman lands on the cave floor, she is struck with surprise as she realizes the Blood Shadow group raised the assassins down here. The martial artist realizes that this is an exact replica of the King Cheng sect citadel. The men from the King Cheng sect are outraged, but the martial artist laughs. The woman tells him that she and her men will search the rest of the cavern, and he ominously tells her to bring him alive. She is surprised by his ferocity, and he repeats himself, saying if the assassin is not delivered alive, it will make him extremely upset, as he needs to find the ones responsible for hiring the assassin and make them pay, even if it is one of the Great 5 sects. She realizes he already suspects her sect of being behind it. Seo Ran is down there as well, and notes that she feels danger down there, and that this is the assassin's domain. As the martial artist explores the cave, he realizes that while the central structure was made to emulate his own sect, the rest of the cave was not. He wonders who made it and why. When he comes across the scroll with the original job request, he flies into a rage, realizing the future of his sect was destroyed for money. His anger breaks a wall, revealing a cavern filled with white snakes, and in it there is a notebook with the words 9 demon style on it. As the martial artist looks at the book, his men find some grains of rice left over, presumably from Pyo Wol eating while he hid. One of them warns the others that he is an assassin and will kill them when they least expect it. As the men search, Pyo Wol does in fact emerge from the darkness to pick one off, unbeknownst to the others. As the others search, they wonder if all of the assassins had been living there. One of the men says to the others that he must have used underhanded tactics in order to defeat Wu Gunsang, as Wu Gunsang was far too powerful to lose to a lowly assassin. As he is saying this, Pyo Wol appears and kills him before vanishing into the darkness once more. The group splits, and he picks them off quickly, one by one, until only one remains. He screams for Pyo Wol to fight him head-on instead of like a coward, only for Pyo Wol to kill him from the darkness. One of the other King Cheng sect men, closer to the entrance to the cave, thinks that this is a trap. Pyo Wol could have fled and hid anywhere, but instead lured them to where he knew best. The man, whose name is King Ming, wants glory in his sect and starts barking out orders. As he and the men begin to walk, he realizes something is coming and yells at his men to dodge as arrows fly out and hit a few of them. They wonder who could possibly live in a booby-trapped cave such as this. The martial artist realizes that the snakes have been gathered in this cave for research, and that the cave was at one point the headquarters of the Nine Demon School. Meanwhile, one of the NEA sect is screaming and crying because two of their squads are dead. The woman who killed the Blood Shadow Captain comforts her and yells at the other panicked warriors to calm down as Pyo Wol is injured, and so time is not on his side. He agrees that time is not on his side, but says he will end this in a flash. Attacking front, he shadows to end her life, but her eyes glow golden, and she parries the blow. The two clash blades, and he goes to finish her, but is stabbed from behind, although not before taking one of her eyes. Seal Ran says she was lucky and simply stabbed where her senses told her to stab. He remarks that that is some sense she has, and she casually says that she hears that a lot. Then asks him to surrender. He grins and lashes out, putting some distance between him and her and removing her sword from his back. He asks her if he will be spared if he surrenders. She hesitates, and he points out that she killed everyone to keep them quiet, so there's no point in him surrendering. She asks how much he knows, and he says he knows the Abyss is behind all of this. The woman who killed the Blood Shadow Captain screams at her to stop talking to him. Seal Ran thinks to herself that she is not fond of the Abyss either, but she is honor-bound to avenge her fiancé Wu Gunsang. She prepares to attack, and Pyo Wol decides it would be better to flee than take her attack head-on, as she is incredibly powerful. Before he can do so, however, a massive strike of energy hits him, sending him across the cave and incapacitating him. The woman who killed the Blood Shadow Captain moves to finish him, but is stopped by the energy thrower, the martial artist from the King Cheng sect. She insists he must be killed, and he says he will take care of that himself. He kneels down in front of Pyo Wol and asks why he would kill Wu Gunsang. The martial artist says even an assassin should know right from wrong. The martial artist pulls out the job request scroll and asks who made the request. Pyo Wol grins, saying he has a guess and that the martial artist already suspects it. Rage fills the martial artist's eyes, and his men appear behind him. He asks where the others are, and they say that they were killed by Pyo Wol. Pyo Wol laughs maniacally, and the martial artist tells him that a quick death is too good for him, and that he must suffer for his crimes. He drags the still laughing Pyo Wol away, and asks if he truly has no intention of atoning for his sins. Pip Wol smiles up at him, and the disgusted martial artist tosses him into the pit of white snakes. The martial artist orders his men to leave the cave and seal up the entrance. As he leaves, snakes begin biting Pyo Wol. He glares up from the snake pit, angry that the martial artist thought the snakes would do his dirty work for him. He grabs a snake and eats it. We then see some time has passed, and there is a single snake left, slithering up the healed but altered body of what was once Pyo Wol. His nails are now pointed, and his skin is pale. His black hair is now as white as the snakes he has devoured. He bites the head off of the final snake and stands, spreading his arms grandly. We see a bustling town street, where a man suddenly crashes through a brothel wall. Pyo Wol tells him that he said he would only be there for 3 days and to not bother him. A woman and 2 men tell him he will pay for laying hands on a martial artist from Sapphire House, and he simply says he has never heard of it, as golden threads wrap around the men's necks, connected to Pyo Wol's fingers. These are his soul-reaping threads. The terrified woman apologizes and begs for the men to be spared, noting that while he is killing them, his eyes are serene, like an enormous snake she had once encountered. He holds up 3 fingers, telling her 3 days, and to not disturb him during that time. He releases the men, and she asks his name, which he gives to her. 3 days later, she gives him some food and sends him on his way, telling the woman next to her that a new star of death has come to the land. Pyo Wol sits and watches the rain, thinking about how 7 years have passed, and he still is trapped by his past. He needs revenge on the King Cheng and MA6. Meanwhile, 3 boisterous warriors rush to get to shelter out of the rain. One is a monk, one is a woman, and one is a man. As they argue and bicker, they realize someone else is here, Pyo Wol. The woman is struck by Pyo Wol's handsomeness and introduces herself as Ranju. The man introduces himself as Daoshi Go, and the monk introduces himself as Hail Sung. Ranju asks where he is heading to, and he tells her he is going to Chengdu, and she says they are going there as well. He notes that while they are all masters, they do not seem like they would go together. So there must be some unifying force behind them. As they board a boat together, they ask him why he is going to Chengdu. He informs them that people owe him a debt, and he intends to collect. He asks what they are going to do, and they tell him they are going for business. He inquires what that might be, since they have nothing to sell. They cryptically tell him, "You can also sell what cannot be seen." They ask what clan he is affiliated with, and he tells them he has none, which shocks them. They look on at the mysterious Pyo Wol as the boat begins moving. As they move, Ranju tries flirting with Pyo Wol, who is indifferent to her. Daoshi Go and Hail Seong talk about how she has a temperament like a spider, and the flirtation is a calculated move on her part. Suddenly, pirates attack the ship, and Daoshi Go tells the men he can help. As he does this, Hail Seong leaps from the boat and attacks the pirates. Daoshi Go tells the men he will charge them money for protection. Hail Seong easily defeats the pirates, leaving their terrified leader unharmed, and then leaps back to the boat, telling Daoshi Go to have Ranju do the fighting next time. They then look to where Pyo Wol is sitting with Ranju. He is still completely unfazed by her flirtation attempts, much to her dismay. Daoshi Go says that he must have gone through pandemonium to have eyes like that. She then sheds a crocodile tear and says she cannot believe he isn't interested, to which he replies that he has no interest in poison roses, regardless of their beauty. Malice enters her eyes, but when she turns back to him, she is all smiles, confirming that he at least thinks she's beautiful. Pyo Wol thinks about how the trio he is traveling with are selling their strength for money, and that the fight with the pirates is enough to have rumors about their prowess spread. He wonders what big conflict is happening that would require fighters such as this to come sell their services. At first, he cannot believe that the King Cheng and MAI sects would allow conflict that large, but then he realizes that this could mean the sects have fallen on hard times. He grins to himself at the thought. Once they get to the land, he parts ways with the trio, telling them he will meet up with them when he gets to Chengdu. He enters a building where he intends to stay the night, and all of the men stare at him, remarking that he seems too pretty to be a man. One boisterous man comes over and asks him, saying he will win 2 pieces of silver if Pyo Wol is a crossdresser. Pyo Wol calmly tells him he is in fact a man, and the man's friends start telling him to strip him and check. Pyo Wol flicks a chopstick into the man's eye. He tells the man he will take the other as well, since his eyes cannot see what is in front of him. He then proceeds to use chopsticks to take down every man in the room. We see Ranju, Daoshi Go, and Hail Sung walking through the streets of Chengdu. They note that everyone has a weapon, and the atmosphere is tense. But Ranju says that it's perfect for people of their profession. They come across a man named Jang Muriang, and Ranju hugs him. He is the Black Cloud Corps captain. The 4 of them discuss how, for the last 7 years, the King Cheng and MA sects have been clashing with one another, and how a large battle will be coming soon. Although no one knows why they have been at odds for all this time. The captain says that it doesn't matter why they are fighting, only that his dream is close to coming true. Meanwhile, Pyo Wol descends the stairs, and the owner of the establishment is struck with fear. He asks the owner who around there is most knowledgeable about the internal politics of the area, as he wishes to know why the sects are at odds with one another. The owner sends Pyo Wol to a place called the Fire Dragon Room, where they will gladly give him any information he wants if he buys a weapon from them. Pyo Wol approaches and finds a man hammering away at a blade when another man strikes the hammerer, telling him he is not allowed to use a hammer in that workshop. He continues to berate the hammerer until he notices Pyo Wol and suddenly turns on the charm in an attempt to get him to buy something. Pyo Wol asks what the hammerer did wrong and is informed that his name is Tang Sochu, a descendant of the Tang clan. Pyo Wol asks if Tang clan members are not allowed to use hammers, and the man is surprised he does not know this. He explains that the Tang clan sided with the demon cult years ago, and now the great sects forbid workshops from teaching smithing techniques to Tang clan descendants, and because of this, the clan fell to ruin. The man then asks what Pyo Wol came to buy, and he says he wants a flying sword. The man tells him that since the conflict started between the two great sects, orders for weapons have doubled. Pyo Wol then sees three men kicking the Tang clan descendant and throws a knife to him, telling him that by enduring as he is, he allows the abuse to continue. The Tang descendant bites the neck of one of his assailants and then picks up the knife. The other two assailants ask if he has gone mad, as he is biting someone like a beast, but he retorts that they have never treated him like a human. He warns them that he will kill the next person who messes with him. The assailants flee and the Tang descendant passes out, although Pyo Wol catches him before he hits the ground. He brings the Tang descendant home and compliments the house, which the Tang descendant takes as sarcasm. He explains that he grew up somewhere swarming with snakes and then tries to leave. The Tang descendant asks where he is going, and at first, Pyo Wol remarks that the Tang descendant likes sticking his nose in other people's business, but the Tang descendant points out that they have that in common. Smiling, having taken a liking to the Tang descendant, Pyo Wol explains that he was used, abandoned, and hunted, and that he intends to get his revenge. When the Tang descendant finds out exactly who it is that Pyo Wol has a vendetta against, he is shocked. Pyo Wol asks for his knife back, but the Tang descendant tells him no, and instead gives him one he made himself. Pyo Wol is impressed with the perfect craftsmanship, and the Tang descendant says that the King Chang and Ma sects are the reason his clan fell apart, and so he supports Pyo Wol in his revenge. Pyo Wol displays his true power, moving the blade around the room with his energy. He names it the Phantom Dagger and tells the Tang descendant that when he hears the name Pyo Wol, know that he is using his dagger. Meanwhile, we see a woman named Lady Wu of the 100 Flowers Room talking to a group of people who seemed fanatically devoted to her. She cries in gratitude, while actually she is disgusted by the men who are fawning over her for her beauty. As she and her followers move to depart, she stops. Pyo Wol is in front of her, and she is floored by his beauty. She begins asking him questions about whether or not he is a martial artist, and he refuses to answer, instead asking if she always asks so many questions when first meeting someone. Her followers become angry, demanding he get on the floor and apologize to her. One of her followers says he will force him to if he does not, and Pyo Wol stands, angered by the fact that the man can be so blinded by a woman's beauty that he cannot assess his opponent properly. The man draws a sword and attacks, but Pyo Wol easily evades. The man becomes enraged and uses the thunderstorm sword technique of the Clear Sky House. Pyo Wol avoids the strikes as effortlessly as walking across the room and now stands in front of Lady Wu. He asks if this is truly the best he can do, and as the man goes to strike him from behind, he hooks 2 fingers under the man's chin and slams him into the ground, shattering the floor with his face. She asks him to spare the man, saying he only acted out to protect her and offers to take the responsibility for him. Her followers all tell her they would rather lay down their lives than see that happen, and Pyo Wol is impressed with how manipulative she is. We next see them in bed together, and she asks him to kill Nam Ho-san, the next in line to be leader of the Thunder Clan. She explains that his father tried to force a marriage between her and Han Ho-san, threatening to aid the King Chen clan against the 100 Flower House and Emi sect if she refused. Pyo Wol surmises that since he has no connection to her house, that even if he failed, no one would connect it to her, and that's why she's asking. She tells him that her aunt will arrange a large reward for him if he succeeds. He asks who her aunt is, and she says it is Pavilion Master Zhanghua, the woman who killed the Blood Shadow Captain. Pyo Wol smiles at this information. We see Ranju and a large man walking up the Ma mountain, where they meet with the Ma sect, including the abbess, Seol Ran, and Zhanghua. The abbess asks them how much they are trying to charge, and the price they name is the same amount of money that they had offered the Blood Shadow clan all those years ago. The MEI sect followers all begin to cause a ruckus, offended that thugs would ask for such a high price, as they could hire several bands of thugs for that much money. Ranju counters by saying none will be as strong as the Black Cloud group. The abbess asks what they intend to do if she refuses, and Ranju informs her that as they speak, a representative is negotiating with the King Cheng sect. The abbess blasts them with energy, driving them to their knees, and Ranju tells her that their loyalties are to the highest bidder. The abbess is angered, but knows that the King Cheng clan is currently more powerful than them, and if she allows these mercenaries to work for them, it will be a surefire King Cheng victory. Meanwhile, Pyo Wol overhears 2 men talking about how the Thunder Clan is demanding too high a payment from them. We then cut to the captain of the Black Cloud group, wondering how everyone is doing with their negotiations. Just then, Dayoshi Go enters and informs him that he has seen the mysterious man he had traveled with Pyo Wol. The captain says he has a bad feeling about it, even though he has no reason to. Ranju interrupts them, bringing in Seol Ran and Zhanghua. He asks them if this means the MEI sect agreed to their deal, and Zhanghua says it depends on if they are actually as strong as they claim. He tells her that he wants trading rights beyond the Great Wall if the MEI sect become the rulers of Sichuan. This enrages Zhanghua, and she blasts apart the table between them, but the captain is completely unfazed. He smiles warmly and says fine. Then forget that and the gold. We just want help settling by the Western Plateau, as no sect wants vagabonds settling near them. She weighs the pros and cons and decides that since most of them will probably die in the upcoming war anyway, settling the survivors shouldn't be too hard. She agrees. Negotiations complete. He offers her a room, and she declines, saying they will stay with her niece in the 100 Flower Room. Suddenly, Ranju bursts in, the captain's serene expression evaporating to one of anger as he asks why she would interrupt. She informs him that the young leader of the Thunder Clan has been assassinated, and the Thunder Clan believes the King Cheng sect is to blame. We then see the leader of Thunder Clan and his men confronting the head of the King Cheng sect. The leader of the King Cheng sect is genuinely confused as to why they blame him, and the leader of Thunder Clan opens the coffin to reveal that the murder was done using the Ku Cheng sect S-72 sword waves. The leader of the King Cheng sect is flabbergasted and says he will get to the bottom of it. However, the martial artist from the King Cheng sect, the one who threw Pyo Wol to the snakes, flies into a rage. angered that they would dare come to the King Chen sect and make accusations. He takes the leader of Thunder Clan down in a single unprovoked strike, and as he storms away, the leader of the King Cheng sect is worried that he has become more violent and reckless in recent times. He has a servant prepare a room for the Thunder Clan in order to try and make peace. He then calls a boy, Chong Yob, over and tells him to head to Chengdu to investigate. Two men discuss the killing of Nam Hozan, with one wondering if the attack could be forged, but the other says that the higher tier a martial art technique, the more distinct it looks. Pyo Wol sits in his room listening to them, menace emanating from him. Lady Wu appears and asks him how he did it. He avoids the question, saying all that matters is that Nam Hozan is dead. He tilts her chin up and gets very close to kiss her, but she pulls away, saying she will not be able to meet him for a while because an important guest has come, her aunt and Seal Ran. She says she likes her aunt, but hates Seal Ran. He asks why they were here, and she says they were meeting with the Black Cloud group. He decides he can wait a little longer. Meanwhile, Xiong Yob is investigating the murder scene. The King Cheng man with him concludes that while it is rough, it is definitely their technique that was used. Xiong Yob says that years ago, the technique was leaked, and the man with him says that without their cultivation technique, the sword technique would not work the way it should. Chong Yob surmises that if it was a sect that did it, they could reverse engineer the cultivation technique. However, it would be pointless, as it would be more efficient to just make a new technique at that point. They then decide to try and figure out how the assassin entered. As Xiong Yob thinks about assassins, he remembers the assassin he chased 7 years ago, and Pyo Wol's grinning face and red eyes appear in his memory. As he and his men walk through town, they run into the MA sect. Xiong Yob and Zhonghua begin arguing back and forth. Seal Ran tries to get Zhonghua to retreat, but she will not hear it. She demands to know if the King Cheng sect killed Nam Hozan, because they heard of his betrothal to Lady Wu. He counters by saying they spent 7 years just to kill the King Cheng clan as future leader. As they argue, Seal Ran thinks about how it all went wrong 7 years ago and how they didn't think the assassin would really kill Wu Gunsang. She laments that she does not even know the name of the assassin who had thrown them into such hard times. She suddenly goes on high alert as she feels a cold gaze. She cannot see anyone in the crowds though, as Pyo Wol is in a disguise. As he throws it off out of sight, he remarks that she is as sharp as ever, and now that the big players from the sects are gathered, he just needs a spark to ignite the fire that will destroy his enemies.